Hey everybody. I'm not going to be there today because my daughter is ill. She has strep throat. We're just happy that it's not COVID. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was on the same page for what I'm expecting you to have complete. When we were together last, we kind of talked about making sure that you had your animal merged together, making sure that that animal was specifically in what I call a group, correct? I named that group, and that group, just so you know, remember, this group allows you to also move your animal around if you need to. Um, just make sure that up here at the top you have that option that says group selected, because by default it will say layer. So make sure that you have group selected. We also talked about bringing the jar in and how we put that into our layers. We also have our background. Now, our background specifically can be kind of whatever you want, but I was kind of pleasantly surprised to see that it was pretty easy to find these kinds of backgrounds with the shelves. What I did is I just did a simple search for background with tabletop, and I found lots of different choices. So by all means, do something like this. Or you can get creative and do something like a forest or anything like that as well. But what I want to make sure that we're all on board here with are these final touches. And one of the final touches we talked about a little bit last time was finding the environment or the habitat for the creature within the jar. So I thought this desert would probably be a great habitat for this particular creature. If you have a water creature, you'll probably want to do water. If you have land, you can do grass or something like that. These are some of the other projects that I had kind of put together. So here's water, and it's kind of a practice in using your masks again. So for the water itself here, I kind of had to make it transparent through the water so you could see the hippo creature. But I also had to make sure that some of the water was transparent so I could see the basic shape of the jar. Um, Here too, let's see, here's my more vertical version. Um, so my elephant zebra bird, for this too, I thought he'd be like a land animal, and I had him kind of flying. But the one thing about the grass is I made sure that you could see, right? You could see the edge of the jar too, because when you're looking through something glass, when you're looking at through a thick portion of the glass, you're going to see more of that glass versus what's inside of it. So again, all of this has to do with masking. So for the creature that we're working with right now, I found this desert, I copied it and I pasted it in. Um, and I have this layer right here, and I'm going to make sure that this layer is underneath my animal layer, right? Not in my animal layer, but underneath it. But it's also going to be underneath the jar. And I'm going to use everything I've done with the jar, meaning the mask, to help me create the mask for the sand that I'm going to put into this jar. So I'm placing it where I think I need to, and you could transform it if you need to by going to Edit, Free Transform, or hitting Control T. But I'm going to use the mask that I have for the jar. Now to do this, I'm going to select the mask for the jar. I'm going to hold my Alt key, and I'm going to click and hold and drag with my mouse. And what it will do is it'll literally copy the mask from the jar and apply it to the sand. Now, one thing you'll probably notice is like, what? The sand is super transparent. Yes, because I made the jar pretty transparent. So what I want to do is I want to make it a little more, or like a little bit more opaque so you can see it. So I'm going to go back into this jar, and remember, white reveals, black hides. So I'm going to use the white. I'm going to use my brush. I have a nice kind of larger and softer brush, and I know it's soft because my hardness is at 0. And I'm going to use the opacity again, and I'm going to mess with the opacity, and I'm going to bring it down. So I'm actually going to bring my brush size up a little bit more and use the brackets to do that. So I'm working in the mask for the sand. So I'm going to start going in here and making it a little bit more opaque. And this is, again, going to be one of those things where you kind of have to work with it and keep going back and forth. So I want this to be pretty opaque or non-transparent. So pretty white, so you can see a lot more of the sand. But at the same time, too, I'll probably go back and remove other parts. So it's going to be kind of this give and take. I'll probably have to go back to the jar and maybe hide some parts of the jar so I can see some more of the sand. So you're going to have to just keep kind of playing with it, basically, okay, until it kind of gets to where it looks like it's realistic. Now, the main thing I want to show you are twofold. I want to show you how to make a cast shadow, and I also want to show you specifically how to make a shadow for your creature. Now, on your classroom, I just want to show you this really quickly. In your classroom, I have for you these instructions as well. So you can see in your instructions, we have the detailed step-by-step instructions for this project. And it goes through what to do. So finding your jar habitat in the background. And then the last steps are those shadows. And they have this option right here. There's a link that goes to how to make a cast shadow. And also right here, I have these steps, that say creating realistic shadows. It's step by step, but you mostly want to look at this part where it says creating a cast shadow. That's what you want to see. And it goes on to the next page. And this cast shadow creates a shadow that looks like this, that makes the object look like it's really sitting in that spot. So we're going to kind of show you how to do that now. So again, I'm going to use the mask that I have for the jar to help me out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and hold, I'm going to right click on my mask. I'm going to choose add mask to selection. And it's going to make a selection of my jar, basically. I'm going to use this to build my shadow, my cast shadow. Now, in the middle here, you can kind of see I have a hole in my selection. So I'm going to use just my regular rectangular marquee. I'm going to hold down my shift key, and I'm going to add to that selection. So I have the whole jar basically selected. And I'm going to use that to make the actual shadow shape itself, because every shadow is based on the object that it's being cast from. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to go down here and make a new layer. This is the one part that a lot of students forget about. So I made a new empty layer. I'm going to name this cast shadow. And then I'm going to go and make sure I have black as my foreground color, right? Good. Okay. I'm going to go to my gradient tool. And then I'm going to make sure that my gradient, I have my basics under my gradients. And I want to go from black to transparent. That's what I want to choose, this black to transparent. And from that black to transparent, I'm going to be able to create a transition from black to transparent. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my gradient in now. I'm going to click, hold, and drag right about like that. And here I've got a pretty good start of a shadow. I'm going to go up here and go to select and then deselect. And then I'm going to bring that layer I made and bring it underneath my jar. Okay, so I've got the start of the shadow. Now I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and I want to do Distort. Now with Distort selected, I'm going to grab this and I'm just going to start moving this around until I have a good idea of where I think that cast shadow would be. Like, where would the light be? Where is it coming from? And once I have it, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And I might use my arrows too to kind of, my arrows on my keyboard to just kind of move it around until it seems like it makes sense. And there I have a decent cast shadow. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a shadow of our creature. Now, Photoshop has options for what's called drop shadows, but this won't necessarily be proper for this particular creature. The light, I think, is kind of coming from the upper right and then being cast down. So his shadow is going to be kind of right underneath him and down. So again, I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer, but this time I'm going to paint this shadow in. So I'm going to have my black again. This time I'm going to bring my brush size down. And I'm also going to make the hardness a little bit sharper. And I'm going to bring the opacity of my paint. I'll keep it right around here, around 60. Now I know it's not going to look real good at first. I know that for a fact. It's going to look kind of crappy at first. I also want to bring my flow, make sure my flow is all the way up. So it's going to look kind of junky. But I'm going to do some things to this shadow to make it look a little bit better. Now you see that I have that transparency low, or lower than 100%. So when I go over it, certain parts are going to be a little bit darker, and then it's going to get a little bit lighter. But I'm just kind of bringing that around like this. And like I said, it's kind of crappy, and I know that right now, but I'm going to do a couple things to make it look a little bit better. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to Filter, Blur, and I'm going to add a blur called a Gaussian blur. And a Gaussian blur is basically just blurs all the pixels out. It softens them up. So I'm going to kind of add that. And just like any of these filters, if you're starting to get the hang of the filters a little bit, you'll notice just a little smidge you have to kind of wait for Photoshop to catch up. So here I'm thinking it's not looking so bad. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And then I'm also going to go in here and maybe mess with the opacity a little bit, because I want it to be darker around the feet and a little bit softer underneath. So I'm thinking that that's not looking so bad. If you look at some of the other ones I did too, you can see the jar is kind of cleaned up. So I kind of painted this shadow just right underneath there on the grass because he's kind of flying. And then I use opacity on that. On the swimming guy, he's got a nice cast shadow here. And he really didn't have much shadow for me to really worry about too much because he's kind of floating in the water. But I wanted to show that, so make sure that you wrap up your project today. I'm sorry I'm not there. My daughter has strep throat, and so I kind of have to hang out with her today and make sure she's all right. She kind of handles everything okay today. I hope to be back right away. But make sure that, your background's in place, your jar is in place, your creature is all together. You have this cast shadow, and then you also have that creature shadow as well. And then you'll have your final project. And when you have your final project, please turn it in through Google Classroom. Okay? So I'll be back as soon as possible. I will see you soon. Thanks. Bye.